So welcome to episode 6 of the talk show. This is a host of conversations that I've been having that will be evolving. It will be a podcast eventually, and really the difference is going to be that it will just be more widely available. Currently, this is something I do on Facebook Live with people I love, and you can also watch the replays in other places. The reason I'm doing these conversations is I feel like behind closed doors, I spend so much of my life having conversations that are so rich and important and kind of exploring the margins of certain topics. And I have so many brilliant human beings in my life. And so this is my opportunity to get to jam live. And I am so stoked to introduce Catherine and Sasha. I know some of you will know Catherine and Sasha because you're our people and we come from the same crew. But Catherine and Sasha and I have a very special triad relationship. And we've been in this relationship, I'm going to explain what I mean by that in a second. We've been in this relationship for a number of years, doing this really magical work behind the scenes. And now this is the first time we're ever coming public as a 3. So Sasha and I have been working together one-to-one. Sasha is my coach and teacher and mentor. And she also is Catherine's coach and teacher and mentor. And she's also our friend. And Catherine and I are also best friends. So together we have this incredibly rich dynamic. And today we're going to be talking about sexual preferences and everything in between. But there's just something very special about what we have together and us choosing to come on here and share it. So I wanted the audience to know that when you feel the specialness of our relationship, there's a reason we're very connected, and we've spent a lot of time kind of mining this relationship together. Before I talk about you both individually, do you two want to say anything about what I just said about us as a 3?
I'd love to share something.
Mm-hmm.
It's around havingness. It's around Sasha and you. And it's not necessarily around sex, but I remember you and Sasha were working together, even though we all come from the same lineage. And I remember coming to you as a sister, and this is a conversation that sometimes women don't have with other women. And I said, wow, Olivia, like I want that. I want to have a coach that has that level of sight and that level of precision and that level of kind and that level of love. And I said to you, it almost feels like a lot to tell you. And is that okay? Because from my upbringing, for a long time, I treaded lightly, right? Like I didn't want to cross any boundaries or do the wrong thing. And so I feel as though our relationship has had a lot of intention in the creation. And then you can tell the speakers or the watchers, the audience, what you said, but Olivia's like, of course you can have it, like that and whatever else. And that is what a sister does, right? Like we are often in this conversation around women seeing another woman and seeing what she has, or a woman telling you that she wants what you have, where there's jealousy or competition or cut somebody down, or you can't have my man, or you can't this. There's all these restrictions instead of just feeling into, does this feel good? And you were a yes to my request. Like, oh, I'll make the introduction. I'll email her and you. Are you open to that? I'm like, yes. And, here we are years later, and look at all that we've been able to create because we got out of our own way and we stepped in with generosity. So I'd add that.
Gorgeous. Thank you.
Beautifully said. Thank you for that.
Sash, do you want to add anything there?
I mean, I want to say a lot, but I don't think I want to add anything right now. I think what you both said is so beautiful, and there is a power that, really, I think the magic. Okay, of course I always want to say something. Of course I want to say something. The magic that's available in the way that you guys relate with each other is sort of like, I think the like the crown jewel of what's available when women stop withholding and get in touch with what they really want and are able to then know that desire is generative, and knowing that like if I share something with you, that we both get to have more, rather than our conditioning, which tells us the opposite, and that you both practice that and you live it. And I think that that's sort of like how the connection between the three of us comes about, is that you both share with each other so generously and so beautifully. You know, I sort of like, you know, I have my coaching hat on sometimes, and I'm like, oh, I no cross talk about other clients, you know, and I'm, you know, that's an important tenet for me of being a coach, is that there's confidentiality and safety with clients, but you two call and talk to each other, and then it spurs these beautiful conversations, and sometimes we get to come together as a triad and have them, and I'm so excited for all the people tuning in that they're going to get to benefit from that. So
so good. Yes, something that I wanted to say in response to both of you is that I remember, and this kind of is me introducing Sasha. So 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, Sasha and I were introduced and had started working together, not in this one-to-one way. And Sash, you just used the words like really living it. And I remember being in your presence, and you really didn't even need to say very much about your life. But I was like, oh, I'm in the presence of somebody who lives the embodiment of what they desire, and not in a way that is bells and whistles and look how great my life is. Like there was like a certain truth to your presence, and you just shared one anecdote about a communication you'd made at your wedding for what you wanted, and there was so much permission for everybody around you to know exactly what was going to be the thing that was going to make you experience the most love and openness on your wedding day. And it was such a perfect anecdote for who you are. And I had my desire of like, I wanted to go on a journey with this woman. And like, here we are 2 years later, we have gone on such a journey together. And, you know, I always say that our work together has allowed me to know what it is to deeply love and care for myself. And I think this is an important thing to say as we enter into this really chargy topic of sexual preferences and sexual desire, which can be quite a sensational, exciting topic. The bedrock of a woman that actually allows herself to give herself that much permission is a lot of love and a lot of acceptance of who she is. And I believe that my journey with you has been that. And it was the thing I knew was available when I met you. And it's the thing that I have, you know, got deeper and deeper access to. And it's the thing, Catherine, I'm sure that you're speaking to this like deep love for oneself, no matter what's happening around us. And I think that is actually the essence of how I live and breathe my relationship to what's true for me. And I get out of my preference of how I want my life to look, because I certainly have some preferences entering into this relationship with Sasha. I'm like, well, I want it like this and like this. And like, you know, the truth is my life completely fell apart in the best way. So Sasha for me is that, and I know everybody today is just going to feel that in that's the frequency of who you are as a woman.
Thank you so much.
And Catherine and I, our relationship actually, you know, kind of really started to deepen and around the same time. And the thing I want to say about you is you're like this, put this into words, having daily access to you and your magic and like getting to build a relationship with you as we've been on these parallel paths together, but yet, you know, we live in different cities, different sides of the world, but we have this commitment to our relationship, and that commitment to our relationship is the same commitment I see you have to the rest of your life. And that, you know, I'd never experienced that level of kind of journeying with someone where we have such a kind of similar unfolding happening, but you are so ruthless in your like unwavering commitment to discovering. And there's something about you, about in your relationship to sex in particular, that, and your relationship to your sexual desire and your hunger, that is full of a lot of playfulness and a lot of permission to constantly be discovering what the next layer is. So having this, there's like different notes that you both touch, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted us to have this. Yeah. Okay. My question for both of you, and if anyone's watching and you have questions for the ladies, this is the time, keep bringing them in. What makes this conversation important for you? What makes you a yes to having it? Sasha, you want to jump in?
Sure. Well, the thing that springs to my mind is understanding what our preferences are, is, I think, a difficult thing to do. And I think, like, for me, I want to start there, and I want like all of the listeners to be able to start there. That we don't usually, most of us aren't like, we don't have a good reference point for understanding what a preference even is. I think when most people get introduced to that language, it's unclear what it means, and it takes some time to really see. So what comes to mind for me in my own journey with preferences is like going back to the point when I was still learning what that word meant, and like that there could be a preference. I was like, no, I just like this kind of human, you know, like this is who I'm attracted to. So I knew attraction, right? Because that's a very, that's a word that we're taught in like media and pop culture, and it's something that we learn at a very young age. We learn what, like, when you're attracted to someone, you like them, and I don't know, like, depending on who your parents are. My parents are great, so I learned that like you might have like physical sensation in your body that tells you something about like how you respond to another human being, and like that's probably like more than a lot of people get in their household, right? And you might even get like a huge download of shame and other stuff when you start to learn what attraction is. Like, oh, I shouldn't have sexual feelings, right? Like there's a lot of other stuff that comes in when we're learning what that means. So preferences for me, when I was learning what they were, came up in the form, well, this is interesting. The story that came to mind when you asked that, and then I'll come back to preferences, was what I swore I did not want was actually the thing that I was looking for. So in my journey of like learning who I am in relationship to other people, and like romantic relationships, sexual relationships, desire, even friendships, but like starting to question and look at, so I have taught classes on a practice called orgasmic meditation and sex and relationship and connection for, well, let's say like almost 13 years now. That's crazy to say, but it's true. So before I started teaching other people and becoming a coach and learning I had to like go through my own learning journey. And when I was learning, the first way I started understanding this stuff was to say, well, I don't want that. And a really brilliant friend of mine and mentor said, it might be that the thing that you're saying that you don't want might be exactly what you're looking for. And I was like, no, ha, 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 ha. And this came up later in another group of people, and somebody said like, well, I definitely don't want to, I don't know, like dye my hair, right? And it turned out that that woman did want to dye her hair. But for some reason, like we start, when we feel something arise in us, saying like, oh, I'm afraid of what will happen if I admit how much I want that thing. Mm-hmm. And so for me, preferences, as I was learning, started as like, this is what I will allow myself to be okay with. This is where I will open. This is where I will be vulnerable. So in relationship, a lot of times it's like, I think when you're a teenager or 20s, 30s, for some people longer than that, there's like a list of how I want that person, right? When we talk about the one, and that's not So I'm married, I have a husband, he's wonderful. He's definitely like my person in the world. And I think the one story does a lot of damage to people. So I'd say the one, because this is like, that could be a whole other show. We won't go into that right this moment. But that we start to have this checklist of what that person needs to be in order to get the best of me. Like, I'm going to show up as who I really am, or I'm going to show up as willing to be vulnerable, willing to be seen, willing to literally get naked or figuratively get naked with this person when they do X, Y, and Z, when they look like this, when they talk like this, when this is their bank account, and then those are our preferences. And it took me a long time to like unpack that, to even learn like there's another way, and there's actually a lot available in that other way. And so learning that I didn't have to use that checklist or my like how I think it should look to guide my life, or to guide how I choose who I enter into relationship with. And ultimately, like, who am I looking for in a life partner? Is like, if I showed my 15-year-old self what my husband looks like and who he is and what our life looks like, I would have laughed out loud probably, not believed the reality of like, what is my reality now? And now I'm like, thank God I was able to put down what I thought it should look like, the like look good version, because I would not have been a happy woman in the look good version if I had held on to those preferences. And we have those because initially they feel safe, right? So for anybody who's just learning about this, or who's just maybe hearing this definition for the first time tonight, this is a place that we all pass through, that we all start from. And there's so much available. And like, now I just feel so grateful that I was willing to hear those incredible voices around me that said like, maybe if you're swearing that you don't want that thing. And at the time what I was saying was like, I don't want to, I saw some friends of mine opening their relationship, having open relationship. And I was like, well, I'm willing to, do anything like, so I'm willing to learn this practice of orgasmic meditation. I don't know if you talked about this on your show before. I'm sure you've mentioned it. Anyway,
I mentioned it, yeah.
I was like, I'm willing to learn this practice. That's no problem. I'm not confronted about orgasmic meditation or about sexuality. Like, I have full permission for myself to go into that realm, no problem. But I don't think I have full permission for myself to want to be connected intimately, emotionally, spiritually, physically with more than one person at a time. And I really was like, I never will do that. That will never happen. And I had no ability to see that that was something that interested me and that like I wanted to explore and learn about. So that's like the tip of the iceberg of what turns me on about preferences. And in the last 13 years since that story, getting to watch other women dismantle those things and be more of who they are and show up as more of who they want to be in relationship. Just like it's so beautiful. I want to say it blows my mind, but like it also opens my like, it makes me tear up, like thinking about the women that I've watched who are like, no, I have to be in this thing that keeps me safe. And then as they like undo the white knuckles and see what else is possible and like unfurl the wings of who they really are. I mean, it sounds a little woo-woo, but like, I don't mean it to be woo-woo. Like, there is something really powerful inside of us that we think we have to hide because we're afraid if we let out who we really are, we're going to be alone, right? Like, that's really where it comes from, I think. So for me, that's why this topic is powerful. And I think I just opened about many, many other things. So maybe there'll be some questions here. And I'd love to hear Catherine's thoughts on this one.
Sasha, that was stunning. Truly, thank you. Yeah, we've opened up some beautiful boxes there, and Catherine, I'd love to hear for you what makes this an important topic.
So what came up for me today, which I hadn't thought of when you asked, was for the ones that don't know me, I've suffered from ovarian cysts. Maybe suffered is not the word, but I have them. And my first surgery was in 2004. And prior to that, like we've discussed my sex life, probably not live on Facebook, but amongst ourselves. And I have a pretty good relationship with it. My parents were not in my life when I was very young, so conditioning around it for me is very limited, other than what I learned when I was really young. So I don't have the same sort of like clamping around my life in my late teen years like most women do. And so I had that experience. And then when I hit my 30s and I had my first surgery, I think it was a month later, I was like, where's my desire? Like, I can't even feel her. It was so scary. So I grabbed my significant other and to the doctor we go. And then the doctor gives what doctors normally give. Oh, you're in your 30s. I think I was like 30, 31. And that's normal. I remember the fire in my being. And I said to him, well, you need to go back wherever that back room is, and you need to find something. And I'm not talking like Viagra, find something. I need something. Like, I need more information. And I just kind of lost it. My partner's like, you need to calm down. It's not the doctor's fault. So after I grabbed myself, because this is definitely way before my emotional intelligent Catherine of today, the version that you see, back then I used to lose my crap all the time. So losing it in front of the doctor and telling him all the ways in which I'm his boss, that was how I used to roll, right? But he did come back with something. Took about a month, but it came back with something. And I'll share this today with the audience, which was to become a teen again. He says, I want you to hold off. Even if you want to have relating, or even like start to really feel into your body again. And so it started, this week you only get to kiss and hold hands. And then these days, you know, you get to hug. And then this day, so it became almost like the teenage version of different bases or going slowly before the grand, you know, penetrative sex sort of thing amongst heteros. And before I knew it, I was myself again. Full-blown desire, turn on, etc. And then it had me think about, wow, I wonder how many women heard that first version of this is just what happens to your physical being as you get older as a woman, and took that as truth. And if you don't have the past experience of having full turn on and full permission for your sex, how it would sound normal. Well, it wasn't that hot to begin with. And so now if this is the natural decline, then it sounds pretty natural. As opposed to, I had so much fire up until then that for me, it was completely insane and unacceptable. And then I would say things for me were pretty much back to normal within a month. And he was telling me like the rest of my life was basically going to shit. And so for me, this topic is important because I recognize that even though preferences is a conversation that doesn't hit, that we don't really excavate and get curious around. Desire is not something that we really excavate and get curious around. We just think that whatever we're experiencing is what's there, and don't stop to think about the conditioning that has influenced that decision. And for me, this is one that's hard for me, but I think Olivia really nails this one, is when you're in desire, and desire is just wanting something with or without preferences. You just admit to yourself that it's something you want, and you sit with it. You sit with the acceptance, you sit with the discomfort, and you sort of just sit on it as if you're sitting on coals, because that's how it feels to me sometimes. I just want to jump off of it and make a decision. I'm going to have it or not have it. Which one are we doing? Going for it or not going for it?
Yeah, know that one.
Olivia's like, oh, let me just watch this unfold. So this topic is important because I recognize that desire and preferences are just part of the ticking clock of how we manifest our lives and lean into what's happening for us.
Thank you so much. I'd never heard you share that story before. I love it. I love it when you know someone so well, and there's just a constant reveal. So beautiful. What a perfect thing to say, because it makes me want to go in this direction, and that is because I remember when I first came into this work, really starting to immerse myself in it about 4 years ago. And I didn't know at the time, but I was like starving. And I, had, reflecting on my life, I had a lot of permission with myself in my teens, 20s to have a lot of sex and have a lot of experiences. But I realized that I was very good at knowing what I liked. And I was very good at recreating a good time. And that was true for everything. And, in this context, we're talking about it sexually, but really everything we talk about can be, sex is such a beautiful metaphor for really how we show up in our relationship with our desire anywhere. And I remember, when I first started to connect that desire is actually something that lives inside of my body and is something that is mine to take care of and cultivate, and is this ever-changing thing, I realized like, oh, I've just been kind of like, woo, I've been just like going for it. And I'm really good at going for it. And I'm really good at kind of, I'm a fucking expert in the look good version of life. And when I meet myself out there in the wild world, and who comes into my field is kind of me. I get to meet myself and like remember what that was like. But I was like, I had the look good version, and really it was riddled with preferences. And how I know that was true is they were really hard to give up, because I was attached to it looking a particular way. And in my evolution since then, my first stop on the train was like, oh wow, I've been starving myself of real desire. I'm going to start to feel real desire. I'm going to start to feed. I'm going to start to have sex in more of a slower way. I'm going to start to have my clit stroked in every day of the week. I'm going to start to suck cock for my own pleasure. And like, I'm going to just actually start to just have these smaller experiences that I had been depriving myself of. But what I hadn't quite mastered and what I hadn't quite realized is, oh, exactly what you just said, Catherine, about like, I didn't trust desire. I've had to learn to build a relationship of trust with desire and with my own feminine. And it has required me to learn how to sit with it. So when you were saying like, oh, Olivia's good at sitting with it, like my whole MO has been learning how to slow down and to feel the like, oh, feel the like that clear sensation that like, oh, something's opening. But then it might go away. And like, it might come back, it might not. And sometimes it doesn't, right? And like, before we came live on air, we had the desire for this conversation, I think 2 or 3 times in the last 12 months. And it was like, I remember this one time where I was like, I remember I started to feel that like guilty feeling of like, I haven't made it happen yet. It hasn't happened. And I was like, hang on, it's not how this works. And when something is true, it's not about, this is the thing I've learned, and I'd love to hear your experience and perspective on this, because with sexual desire and desire in general, it's not about the acquisition of it happening.
Right.
And that's such a head fuck. Like, what do you mean? Because I like feel it. I should have it. What do you mean I don't have it? Right. It's like who we get to discover and be on the way of opening to it. Can we be with that even when it says, oh, no, like it's changed? Yeah. So my question for both of you, or if you just want to jump in and if you have any comments, is around your own relationship to feeling this thing inside of you and learning to trust it. Like, what was that like for you?
I would love to add to that question so that we can give it to Sasha and say,
you don't want to answer it, babe?
well, there's a piece here that I think has the opportunity for distinction. Mm-hmm. I feel like this is definitely Sasha's genius. Mm. I mean, this is how we come to you, babe. You embody this day and night, every day, all day.
There's like a secret, whatever. Thank you. How about that?
Yes.
That is me as a woman not wanting to receive the affirmation of the reflection and the gratitude that you just expressed. So thank you. I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to listen.
In our lineage, the phrase I have heard often is true desire is in, like, true desire because it's attained. Mm-hmm. How does it?
True desire is measured by attainment.
That's the word. That's the phrase. Mm-hmm. True desire is measured by attainment. But from our work together, watching Olivia stew, acquiring more patience so that I can learn how to stew, because I'm really good at, and I'll let the listeners know, I have a desire come up. If I think it's really far out and not within my reach, I'm like, oh, next. Like, I don't want that desire. I want a different one. One that's easier, because I can get the easier one or a different result. Let me just swap that one out. And that's been part of the fine tuning of really feeling, well, actually there's a slower feel here. All right, what wants to emerge? Because it's actually not so much about, I have the desire for this thing, let me go get the thing, but it's what happens in the space in between. But if it's about what's happening in the space in between, then how is desire measured? By attainment. So
say more about like, if it's happening in the space in between. Keep talking about that for a moment.
Happening in the space in between is sometimes you have a desire for something and you start to feel what's true and go in that direction, feel what's true and go in that direction.
If the desire changes before you get to the desire,
yes.
How does the attainment thing work? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so here's one piece of it, and you tell me when I'm done if this touches what you're talking about. That my experience is that, like, I think that my desire is going to, like, give me a vision that's going to be very literal of how it's going to show up. But the desire, the body-based information that I get is not like a 3D printed picture of, like, how I want my latte, right? It's like, this is how I want to feel as I'm feeling the hot, warm, milky, like foamy, like dark roast kind of flavor with like a tiny bit of sugar, but not too much. Like, and then like, I almost want my tongue to be burned because it's that hot, but like, I don't want to feel like my mouth has a burnt tongue afterwards. Right. It's all of this like visceral, experiential, then my like the rest of my body warms up as I'm like feeling the caffeine, like light buzz, like maybe it's like half calf, half decaf, right? Like I'm getting information about what to tell you to put in the cup by how I feel as I'm describing what I want, right? So for me, because I have a lot of practice with this, it's like, as I'm talking about what I want, I'm translating what I feel into, here's how to be successful with me, right? This is my latte order. And like, sometimes what we want changes. And I think this is where a lot of women are like, well, I don't know what I want, right? I like talk to women who've been married for years and years and like, oh, okay, like issues with sex in the bedroom, you and your partner, like, let's talk about it. What's going on? Like, what happens when you you get undressed and you get in bed and the kids are away at school and you're like, you're in your private space and now it's time and like we can have sex and what do? I don't know what I want. I'm frozen, right? It's like, what happens is we don't know how to translate what's happening in here. And so we come up with what's happening in here. I'm not going to be able to get it into words. I'm not going to be able to help you be successful with me. And so I like that computes in our mind often as I don't know what I want, which is not the thing you were asking, but I wanted to say that from where Olivia was before, that so many women don't know what they want. I actually think it's not true, but so many women like translate this, I think, piece that you're talking about, Catherine, as I don't know. And I think where you are and your learning is like, it's not that I don't know, but by the time I get there, like, well, I didn't attain it. And like, now it's like turned into this totally other thing, right? I don't want a latte anymore. I want to, I don't think of a food, like I want a slice of chocolate cake, right? I don't even want to be in a cup. I want a completely different thing. And like learning A, how to be with that in yourself, and B, how to guide whoever you're with as your desires changing. Like, oh, thank you so much for the 15 minutes of like dedicated attention on my, I don't know what word are we allowed to say on Facebook, on my genitals. Like, thank you for that. Like, that feels so incredible. Now I want something completely different. And I know I said I wanted 35 minutes of attention on this particular part of my body, but now that we're in here, like what I want is something completely different. And like, that's hard. That's vulnerable to say like, I don't want that. I want this. Right. And then we have to deal with the other person's feelings. Like there's a lot of stuff that comes up there. But my experience is we have to learn how to identify the desire, and then we have to learn how to express the desire. And those are two different things. And then we have to learn how to receive it, which is a whole other thing. And in that process, like, that's not 10 minutes. That's a long time that it takes to like feel it and express it and receive it. And if we're not talking about, 5 minutes of dedicated attention in a bedroom with a partner, we're talking about like, what kind of experience do I want to have when I plan a date with this person next Friday? Or like, what kind of human do I want to call into my life to be my life partner? Like, of course it's going to change a million times, of course, right? And how do we learn how to be with that? So I think like when Olivia says like my feminine, right? Like what's happening inside of us, the voice that's talking to us and giving us information. And it might not be a clear voice. It might be like a little like, like a subtle feeling, right? How do we work with that? Does that answer your question?
Beautifully. I mean,
and I have one more thing to say.
Oh, let's go
really quickly. that attainment, like I think we conflate attainment with our whole like, okay, capitalist society, our obsession with what can we produce, right? You go to work, you work 40 hours a week, you get a paycheck, you buy this house and the picket fence with your paycheck, right? And your 2 cars, and then you have your kids and you buy the groceries, and like now I've attained because I've I know there's probably a lot of listeners that are not American, but the American dream, right? Or like the dream of like and America is like sadly obsessed with this, like I have to produce, and this translates directly to our sex. I have to produce in order to be loved or wanted or important, or like have relationship, or have the kind of sex I want, or be seen by my partner, or get my husband to hear my desire, or whatever it is, right? So what I would say is attainment is like actually what we say when we say true desire is measured by attainment. Attainment is not like, can I produce the exact latte that I thought of when I felt that feeling in my body, but attainment is me being willing to be with the desire as it changes and it flows and it moves and it gets so uncomfortable, but I'm willing, and we're going to go into this with the women tomorrow, Olivia. I'm willing to be with myself. And the language I would use for that is like, hold the weight of the desire. What does it feel like to be with wanting that thing for we don't know how long it's going to be, right? Like that's the feminine. The feminine doesn't say how long. Our bodies don't say like, how long do I want attention on this particular area of my body? It's just like right now it wants attention. Now it wants attention over here. Now it doesn't want any more attention. Now I gotta go.
Mm. Mm. So I've just caught something, like a new insight for me as you're saying all of this, and brilliant, and just I think like the way you're articulating this is so digestible for the exact experience of what that's like. And there's something that I have both experienced myself, and I see it in my women, and I see it in the world at large, where, you know, one of the conditionings as women that we have is, you know, one of them is like, you shouldn't have desire is bad and wrong. And then, you know, we take that one on. And then the other one is like, men are responsible for you and your happiness. So, you know, when it comes to the nuance of our relationship to our desire, I see, you know, both the disconnection from it and the lack of experience of getting to know what it is in its ever-changing beast-like way, but also then to use other people, you know, consciously or unconsciously as a scapegoat to hold it. And certainly for me and, you know, Sash, this has been one of our, you know, threads together, is me really learning as a woman to stay with the inconvenience of that process the whole way through, when it's so much easier to be like, he doesn't know, it's his fault, you know, and like, and it's taken me years to unlearn this belief that it's someone else's responsibility to be with this thing inside of myself, and to commit to the intimacy of knowing it, and the because if I don't trust it, then I certainly transmit to anyone around me that I don't trust them with it.
Absolutely. And that's such a good admission. That is so like, that's a product of the work that you've done. Knowing that, like, if I don't trust me,
yes,
then I immediately project, and that gets translated one of many messy ways into the connection with the other person. So good.
Right. Well, and the visceral thing I get is, before I was able to be with it and then learn how to communicate it and then learn how to sit in the face of potentially often the rejection of it, or it not quite happening in the way that I had thought it might. So many, you know, to then catch, oh, I'm getting resentful, I'm overgiving, to overcompensate, to hide, you know, all of these places, like knowing all of my mechanisms, that has it create an enormous delta between me and the other person. Totally. And that practice of both like staying with the trusting, you know, like I mean, it's the same with trusting anything, right? But this particular one is enormous because it's sensational.
Yeah.
And it creates discomfort in myself and potentially the other person that I might be sharing it with.
Totally.
And so the practice of mining out any resentment that I have about somebody else, which is really about my own lack of trust that I'm going to know what it is and communicate it and follow it all the way. Am I going to abandon it again like I have in the past? And like, you know, I opened this by saying how much more love I have for myself after our time together. And this is kind of what it looks like. It's like being enormously patient.
Yes.
Right?
So good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good. Catherine, did you want to add more, say more, respond?
This is so good. I'm loving this part, and I'm seeing, you know, the differences of like where Olivia sits with the desire and then where I sit with it, right? I have definitely more masculine tendency, like unraveling a lot of that for myself. And the women that come to me, it's more like that. Like, why didn't I have it yesterday? Like, what happened? What went, what fell through, right? And when you were describing the bedroom scene, it's just a remembering sometimes, right? I'm so good in that arena because I've allowed myself so much patience and so much permission to be a yes and to change my mind at any point and say, no, I'm done and whatever. I really don't have the same qualms there like I do in my life. In my life, I have to put a lot more attention on it. And as you were talking, I was like, if I could only walk through my daily life and my desires with my eyes closed, maybe it'd make it easier. Maybe, I don't know. And so what I heard in that transmission was, being able to stay with it, regardless of the outcome, is part of my struggle sometimes, and the struggle with the women that I work with, because we're so used to going for the thing that we can attain.
Right.
And it sort of like really puts desire on its head. Yeah.
Can you say a little bit, Catherine, what you're learning now about, like, because I hear you, like, you're making the connection right now in real time, but also like in your life, in this moment, you're making the connection.
In real time, with everybody watching, yes.
With everyone watching, just no pressure or anything. Like,
no big deal.
It's fine. Like, what is the difference in you when you get to that thing you thought you wanted, but now like your desire has shifted, but you're like, oh, I got the thing. I have to digest. I have to take in that thing, even though now my body is actually telling me I want something else. Can you identify the difference between that and when you allow yourself to like say like, oh, now my desire is totally flipped on its head and it's completely different than I thought it would, but actually it's nourishing this part of me that is really like the thing I want is actually getting touched. And I think for a lot of women, when this happens, every time, I mean, for me, I'll just say like every time it blows my mind, like, oh my God, that thirst that I did not think could be quenched ever, that I was just like, I'm going to be wanting this thing for the rest of my life, like the torture, right, of that. And then it gets touched and it's profound. Like, and I think some people have very few experiences of being able to name and identify this. And I think that it's totally possible to identify it in sex. And if you can identify it in sex, you can do it in every other area of your life.
Well, I've heard that many times, and I'm here to tell you that it requires a lot of patience and a lot of work, because I haven't seen the direct translation. But I do have that permission in sex, and I have the permission in food. Like there are places in my life where I have a lot of patience, and it's almost like the fine tuning, the tuning knob, right? Like on a radio station, like my station is so fine tuned from smell, sound, taste. It's exquisite the way I can order at a restaurant, or what it feels like to be with me in like an intimate setting. Or even with my relational setting, like when I'm speaking with you or speaking to Olivia, my ability to see, right, is really delicious. And it feeds me in a way that like nothing else in the world does. But there are other areas. So for example, a tough one would be like health. Right? Where when I was like looking to fix it,
right.
I tried so many different ways and I got whacked along the way, and, organic this, doctor that. And I am not looking to be saved for anybody that's watching the live stream. I don't want any like DMs on Special Magic or anything like that. Please, this is just for the share. And I remember one of my teachers once said to me, what happens if nothing changes? And what I'm hearing in this conversation. So the first part of that question for me was, what happens if nothing changes? Okay, I learned to love what is. And then what I'm hearing here, that you're like, something's clicking for you. So here I am trying to put the pieces together on live stream. So if nothing changed, I learned to love what is. And then with our work together here in the past few years of cultivating desire, it's like, oh, I still have the desire for a different health state? And what does it feel like to still be on the path without the pressure of a time stop of when I have to have it? And what if I can go my whole life wanting it, going towards it, but never attaining it?
Mm-hmm.
It's just the path.
Mm-hmm.
And like being with both, like I'm like borderline cry here, both the blessings of that and the disheartening pain of like not getting it as well. Like it's so sensational to sit with that daily. It requires a lot of commitment to stay in the room.
That reminds me of something, and I think Olivia, you might, I don't know if you have any questions from the viewers or you have a next spot you want to go, but what you just said about like going towards that thing and possibly never attaining it reminds me of this like perfect metaphor, which is climax in sex, and that we are culturally ultra obsessed with like climax, and if we have it, then that's like the penultimate, like that's what sex is should be about. Like if I please my partner, it's because she had an orgasm, right? That like we're so obsessed with that. And one of the things that like is powerful for me that I've learned experientially through many years, days, hours of practice and being with my body in a practice of orgasmic meditation, and then learning how to be with my body in sex and in intimacy and like in other realms, is that there's so much available if I take away that goal of climax, and that like I actually can feel, I mean, this is like, I'll just say what I'm going to say. I actually can feel, rather than feeling this one point on a map or like the top of the mountain, I get to feel like the 10 million stars above the mountain, right? Like I get to feel all of these other locations when I'm truly taking the goal off the table. And I would say like taking that goal off the table, despite my years of practice and teaching this and like knowing about sexuality, like my husband and I still are like, oh, right, let's take the goal off the table again. And like, that is a practice for us in our relationship, and our sex is like not being goal oriented. And then when in that moment where we like let go of the goal trapeze and we're like floating in the air between like having a goal and like whatever the next moment where we have to remember to not have a goal again, is like so much electrical sensation in my body. It's like, it's funny because you teared up at what you were saying of like, oh, that feeling of like, oh, going towards it and maybe never getting there. And I'm like, and the euphoria of like what I feel in my body of like the like how I get to feel and experience physical sensation differently because I've like let go of that way I think it should look. And it's uncomfortable and it's powerful.
Agreed.
I have something for this one. So I love that we're here. This is a good fucking spot. So the thing that I was also unraveling earlier in my share about like the trust piece, and then the thing I didn't say, which was perfect because I went somewhere else, but the thing I didn't say was, you know, I've been teaching this point about how as women, you know, our path is to be responsible and connected to this thing, and like no one can actually do that work for us. Like it is an illusion that someone else can even hold it.
Yeah.
And you know, those of us that have kind of the seasoned practitioners, that's something that, you know, we're relatively well versed in. Yet it's really fucking hard in practice to live and breathe holding this and being intimate with it. And this conversation is showing me a slightly different way of how to teach this premise of you're responsible for your turn on. Like, and because people say that, and it's a bit like the attainment, like, what does that really mean?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, as a woman, like it, you know, my friend Stefania, I think you're watching, you know, she says this in a way that I love, like, you know, arrive wet. Right. And the thing I'm seeing in this conversation is, and it really loops beautifully to what you just said, Catherine, is when we're not open to going after it, then we're passively waiting. And that's kind of like a dead zone. Life isn't happening there. Right. So when we're passive waiting, expecting someone else to have the key and someone else to come along and figure this thing out, we're the ones that suffer. And it's a very different type of suffering to being so uncomfortable in the pursuit of something that you may never experience or have. Yeah. That's like the mic drop that I've just realized in how to articulate this to someone that might be hearing this for the first time. Because I know how frustrating it is. Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say that is so good. Like, as you were saying that, I was like, oh, I'm hearing you on 5 different levels of abstraction. Like, yeah. You could be talking about sex, you could be talking about intimacy, you could be talking about your desire as a woman, right? Your physical desire, your emotional desire. Like, there's so many levels that what you just said hits on. That's so brilliant.
Thank you. Oh, this is good. Well, because I actually wanted to ask both of you, because I know this is one that is, it's hard. It's hard to get, and it takes, I think, years with this letting go of the preferential desire for things to feel a specific way and look a specific way. Mm-hmm. And I realize I said preferential desire, which is confusing given we're separating the two words. I'm going to say it differently so it actually makes sense. So separating, letting go of the preference, which is comfortable, of I've experienced in the past that I get off with men who, or in situations like, and I'm going to actually use an example because I think story time is important. I actually shared a little bit of this story recently when I wrote about preferences. You know, I had this really, really hot, short relationship with this much older, I'm going to call him a gentleman because he was a gentleman in New York. And I was exploring BDSM for the first time, and I was exploring myself as a dominatrix and really the energetics of that, like how to really take command and to hold myself and energetically connect to somebody else. And my connection went a bit funny there, funnily enough, when I talked about being a dominatrix. My screen went and I'm gonna, you know, people hear BDSM, they get a bit tripped out, like, oh, I don't know anything about that. Oh my God, I'm a beginner. Like, I'm just gonna talk really simply and say that the thing that was really hot about me and this man was physically, if you'd have told me I would have been turned on outside of the circumstance, I would have been like, this is disgusting. I would have had a voice that would have said, no way, so gross. And I would have had all of these like judgments, just immediate. I don't like that. When I went slow enough with myself into a realm of discovery with this person, I discovered that I fucking loved so many parts of interacting with this person. And I love the way I love the way it felt when we spoke. I love the look of his body. I love the way that he kissed me. I love the way that he would get down on the floor and he would serve me breakfast. Because when we were playing out our scenes, I love the way that, I loved the depth of the conversation. I loved the way that our skin felt when we were up against one another. There were so many parts of this experience that were an enormous turn on for me. I was such a yes to it. And my yes allowed me to be present with everything I was experiencing and not naming it as bad and wrong. Even when there were moments when my mind would come in and be like, this is a pretty fucking random scenario that you're in right now. Like, whoa, how did you find yourself here? And then I'm like, back to the moment. There's always going to be that voice up here that's judging and is like, you shouldn't have this. This is da 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 da. And it's going to convince you as to why you shouldn't be having this experience. And it might be because it's bad and wrong. It might be because there's something wrong with the other person. But the truth was, I'm loving this. And I loved it until I didn't. And I was complete. We were both complete. And we, ended at the appropriate moment. But I always think back to that. And I think back to my body when I just allowed her to lead me with discernment so I could play in my range and like have it feel good. I learned that my ability to be turned on is a choice, and it's something that I'm committed to, and it isn't about the other person. And it is all of the things in the way are all of the preconceived ideas I have about myself and about the other person, which is my understanding of preferences. It's like, it's like, and it creates this false belief about what's possible. So I'm sharing that story, and I'm sharing it because it's a good example. And I did start with a question. I've actually forgotten the question that I had. And I think that it's the one, let me just fill into where I want to go here. Okay. So imagine somebody watching this is hearing this for the first time, right? Like, what do you mean I'm responsible for being turned on? What do you mean I can get off with an old man with a mustache? What do you mean? This is for you, Catherine. What do you mean I could have the hottest sex of my life with someone with bad breath? Bad breath. What do you mean? Actually, I discovered, I really love having sex in the afternoon. I was like, didn't know that until I stepped outside of the rhythm of how sex usually happened, right? There's just like all of these things. There's all of these things that are available on the other side of what we believe we like and what we believe is the only way that our bodies will open and function and do the thing that, you spoke to it beautifully with climax, Sasha.
It's like, it's so interesting because I think when you're hearing some of this information for the first time, I'm like, I'm starting to talk and I know where I'm going. We'll see what happens. I'm sure something will come out. That when you're hearing some of this information that we're talking about the first time, I think it's really, I think my internal monologue when I was learning this stuff was like, oh, I don't do that. I don't have that problem. I don't have those judgments. Like, I don't withhold my, I want to speak carefully. Like, I don't withhold my like all that there is to share with another person: sex, desire, intimacy, love, the breadth of who I am. Like, I don't withhold that based on waiting for him to come in and get me, or her to come in and get me, or who, like, this other person to like do a thing so that I'll open. Like, there was nowhere on my radar that I wouldn't have admitted that was even present in my life. And I think that comes from conditioning, like things that we're told that we are or that we believe as women, that we come to believe are true because we saw it in a movie when we were 12 and we believed it, or 15, or we were told by our parents or our mothers that that's how the reality is for women. And so we take that on as like, oh, that's just part of my being, that belief, whatever it is. And I think it's really hard to believe that we're missing. I would have had a hard time believing that I was missing out on anything. And like really worked hard to tell you I was having enough. Like I don't need to feel more. I don't need to be more in touch with, like this Mary Oliver poem, just the soft animal of my body, right? Like, I don't need to be more in touch with that because what I have is good enough. And what I've come to learn is like, I think that that's really, I think that I'm like really wanting to choose my words carefully because I'm sure there's someone out there who's like, this is speaking to them, and I don't want to add any additional shame on top of whatever shame we already are carrying, because I think there's a lot in this realm. But I think that the notion of like things are good enough as they are is really damaging to women in the pursuit of our freedom and our turn on. Like you talk about turn on so beautifully, right? Like, well, I'm turned on enough, or like what I have in my sex life is like already how I want it, or I'm gonna just like so many stories to cover up disappointment and like anger and like a well of feelings, like a lot of feelings that we think that we can like quietly unpack one tissue at a time, like in the therapist's office with the door closed and that it may never see the light of day, or like in a glass of wine, right? Like alcohol culture is so normalized, and like I will just like absolve that my sex in my marriage is like good enough when I have my early glass of wine at 5 p.m. and like, and that is like not even normalized, it's like championed. And I think it's a tragedy to the true desire in our hearts and our bodies and our like our physical bodies, what they're asking for is so, it is such a quiet voice, and it is so important. And when we learn how to listen to it, like it unlocks so much more than we could ever do. Like, not that therapy isn't great and important, but like quietly one teeny tissue at a time. I mean, like using tissue metaphor, because I think like how carefully you have to pull the tissue out of the box to not get sick, right? Is like how we think our emotions are supposed to come out. And that when we're saying like, it's good enough as it is, I don't want more, my body's not hungry for sex, I don't want to be more connected to my partner, it's okay that we don't have the kind of sex that we both want, that's like a delusion to keep us from feeling the well of feelings. And the well of feelings is our power. Like that is our power and our freedom as women. And like, it is a conspiracy theory that we all have enrolled ourselves in, right? All the media and the stories we get from the movies when we're 12, and what the, you know, mothers who weren't able to heal their own trauma, like sadly passed down. And then we grow up thinking that like, I need to keep this bottled in, and that's what's going to have me be safe and like have my achievement-based life in a good way. And so like, way up on my soapbox here, but like my point is that like
fucking beautiful.
So
good.
that like we're missing out, that when we don't listen to that voice that's like, hey, like I want to be touched. I don't want to wait until my partner is done worrying about the finances or the you know, their work that they'd spend 18 hours a day. Like now it's the pandemic, so everyone's like working at home on their computers, but still behind closed doors and not talking to each other, you know? And like, that's not what we do at my house. Like the door is open and we have sex in the middle of the day and we talk about our desire, and it's terrifying still, right? Like I have so much experience, and like we still have to wrestle out, like, how do we talk about this? What do we do? We have a 1-year-old son, you know, like how do we manage our desire with that? But it's like, if I as a woman am not listening to that voice in my own body and believing that I'm going to handle it with some kind of numbing mechanism, which I believe alcohol is a way to numb. Anger can be a numbing. If you're pissed off that your husband is stupid because you didn't take out the trash again, you are numbing your own emotions, right? And like that is on top of just not wanting to hear the little tiny voice that is like, I just want to be touched in this way. I just want to be going towards that thing. I just want to open a little more. I just want to be felt for who I am. And I just want to like let that into the world.
Whoa.
So good, Sasha.
So good. I'm nailed. Catherine's nailed. The listeners are nailed.
The live stream's nailed.
But really, like, I'm really grateful that you went there. I'm really grateful. I didn't know we needed to go there, but that was so, so perfect. I felt it throughout my entire body. And Stefania said, Sasha, lighting my clit right now. And she's not even able to finish the sentence. Darby says, I can't express in words how grateful I am for this. I've only been listening for about 15 minutes, but I wish I heard it from the beginning. The thing I really heard there, and Catherine, I'd love to hear a reflection of that transmission from Sasha, because I think we should just be with this for a moment. The thing I hear, and I think, Sash, you take such a beautiful stand in the world for this. Like, you live and breathe it, you teach it, you pass it down. And that is that voice is in there for every woman, for anyone, really. It's there. It's just all the ways we've been numbing it, avoiding it, quietening it, pretending it's not. And I think it speaks so beautifully to this path, which is really a recommitment to the voice, no matter what.
Totally.
Catherine.
I'd like to attempt to do some sewing here, some connecting. So the prompt for Sash before she went so beautifully there was like, what happens to, what do we say to the woman that is hearing this for the first time? And she's like, what does that mean? Or I can't do that. Or I'm good, as Sasha says. I have enough, right? And I think this is like a yes and. It's like, I have enough. Maybe let's just assume it's true, right? That you have a havingness already that has a particular satiate, like you're satiated. You're not like thirsty and starving and hungry, or maybe you are, but let's just think of enough as enough. Desire is something that's still occurring even if there's enough. And that's what Sasha's speaking to so beautifully. That, yes, you have enough right now. And what's happening is that there's something else co-arising, saying, hey, look here. And Sasha's inviting us to look at and listen to that voice saying, these are all the ways in which we distract ourselves, dissipate, quiet, shun, shame, guilt, whatever, all the different mechanisms that we use so that we don't have to look at ourselves. And one of the ways that you mentioned is something that I'll sew in here. When women have a lot of things stuffed in, there's a term that we use in our lineage that something comes out sideways. You want something and it's coming out sort of like the request is weird, or the way it arises for you is strange. And so it's kind of like a woman like, right? And society has told us to be manicured and presentable. I have been working on dismantling this one for a really long time because my way of that was I showed up handled. But I'm going to speak to the woman that's on the other spectrum of that right now, which is the woman that's in chaos. The woman that did pull out the tissues, the woman that ripped the box open. Yes, be you, and the more and more that you can listen to that voice, the goal isn't to be Catherine manicured or to know every single desire that's on the way because you have enough, but like, you know, there's something core rising. So let's get this one and this one and this one and this one. It's about holding yourself with all that's happening, having enough, wanting to be manicured, feeling the core rising over here, feeling the other thing over there, because as women, we can hold all of it. And when it doesn't feel good is when another woman comes and dumps it on you because to hold it for you, or you dump it on your man to hold it for you. But when you hold it yourself, that chaos just feels like turn on in your body. And the more you hold it, the longer you hold it, the more discernment you have. And the more you play with it, like Sasha says, like you figure, oh, I want to have sex in the middle of the afternoon, but my 1-year-old is here and all the doors are open. And what's the best way to do it? Maybe it's going to be after lunch. Maybe it's going to be at brunch. Maybe it'll be tomorrow morning. And you get to stay with it instead of like, I want to have it right now. And you just can't, and it's like hot potato with it. The more you can stay with yourself, that's where the juice is. That's where you arrive, as Stefania would say, wet, right? That's where you are living in your turn on and where you get to experience the responsibility of what you want and being responsible for your turn on. To me, that's what that looks like. It's holding all of yourself.
So good. Thank you. The nugget there is for me is and there's some comments, Sasha, so you can just read them as I'm saying this. Can you see the thread, the feed?
Yeah, I'm on it.
Yeah, okay, good. The thing that I love about what you just said, Catherine, is like I get to remember that this is how we learn, right? Like the starting place might be utter chaos, the box ripped open, or it might be like, you know, you haven't even got yourself in the room. You're completely manicured behind closed doors. Everything's fine. The good wife, they're secretly seething in the corner, but like presenting to the world that everything's perfect, kind of like handcuffed to this commitment we made to be, you know, loyal to keeping it all together. And I think it doesn't matter, you know, where you start. That, you know, this path is it's you're learning. The only way is to commit and to learn right here.
Stay in the room, stay on the mat.
Stay in the room. Yeah. And you say that beautifully. Like I've witnessed you do that so beautifully of like, I'm just here to be in the room. I remember, you know, we you know, did a similar program, Sasha, quite long before us, but I remember I used to, you know, no one can really believe this when I tell this story, and it's absolutely nothing to do with sex, but it's to do with receiving attention and being in the truth. I would, you know, in my coaching program, hundreds of people, and I could feel that voice. It had something to say. And I would, you know, every now and again, I would like be like, like it would have me searing so hot that I would put my hand up. And I was someone that presented to the world as like outspoken, you know, I led an organization, I was a leader, I was a CEO, I was like all of these things that had me be very confident out there in the world. But in this room where the currency was truth, And I started to learn how much of what I was saying wasn't actually what was true for what was happening inside of myself. I just learned to be very presentable. When I was given the mic, and I call it the mic of truth, I couldn't speak. They would give it to me like, hey, you know, hundreds of people, like, what do you have to say? What's your check-in? And I just would stand there like this. Catherine, you might remember this. I would just be like a deer in the headlights. And it was so humiliating to my ego that wanted to present to the world as this like person who had it together. And it probably happened like 5 times. And the teacher would be like, Rachel, show it's like, what are you gonna say? I'd be like, ooh. And it took me 5 times of standing up and feeling like I wanted to die and to crawl beneath the floorboards to eventually learn to translate the experience I was having into words in that moment to be in the room. But for the 5 times that I was prior to that, my commitment was to just hold the mic and shake, because that was all I had access to. And it reminds me of when I first started to be honest in bed. You know, there would be like the whole time I'd be like, I need to say this one thing. And it would be like, you know, just that feeling of like, I can feel it. I can't get it out. I can't get it out. I can't get it out. And eventually learning to say, hey, I would really like to slow down. And then I was like, oh, I said it, you know, and like, I'm revealing myself. It's simple. And so for anyone watching this, wherever you are in your journey, I'm sharing this because I had to completely unlearn who I was to be able to be even doing this with both of you, and to be able to have the sex and the intimacy that I'm now able to communicate and be in the presence of receiving. Like it takes a lot of committing to all of the discomfort that comes with learning how to be with that voice, no matter how loud or soft or quiet or over amplified or underspoken it is. Like, it takes a really big commitment, and that journey is different for every single person. But I think the threads that unite us all is being willing to sit in discomfort without being able to see where the path is headed. Totally. And trusting, and trusting that it's for you because you're choosing it.
We do have one question on the thread, and I want to say something about the mic of truth, if I may, but I'm not sure what our time is. Are we close to time?
So it feels like we're in our descent. That's what feels true for me. Like we've got totally. So I would think answering a question, and then we can close. And if anyone else has any questions, please put them in, and we can kind of feel into whether we answer them here or we follow up on the thread.
Yeah. Can I say something quickly about the mic of truth? Just for anyone out there that wants to know, like, what I think makes, you know, like Olivia's talking about being on a microphone in a room full of other students that she was on a learning journey with. And I think what makes the mic of truth is she was literally surrounded, but also, like, are you surrounding yourself in your life with other people who are on the same path, on the same quest for internal honesty and external honesty? And that when you are playing in that way, the things that are true are actually the most sensational and the most powerful, and that we learn all the costumes that we wear and the ways that we hide ourselves actually don't have us feel more connected to other people. And so when you're surrounded by those people, the mic of truth is like all those people holding you accountable to you being who you want to be, and not like they're gonna check on Olivia and see if she's doing what she said, but like it's power unless you ask them to, and then they will, right? But like it's powerful to be surrounded by other people who are also asking those questions and saying, like, I don't want to settle for no, this is I'm good, you know, that they want to go deeper and they want to have more of that communication and And we get to create that in our communities and in our lives by having these conversations with each other. I think that's really where it starts. So that's what I wanted to say about that. The mic of truth is always available.
That's really beautiful. Thank you for adding that. Yeah. Do you want to answer this question?
Yeah. So what can a woman say to her partner if he or she sees desire when there is enough as asking too much? And she says, shout out to Sasha, I will never be satisfied, from Hamilton, of course, Hamilton fan. Great song, by the way, for those of you who aren't Hamilton junkies like me. What can a woman say to her partner if the partner sees desire when there's enough as asking too much? I mean, so this is really, it's a great question. I think it is, you would not be a human woman on this earth if you didn't have a concern that what you want is going to be too much. And I would imagine that, so I would imagine A, that your partner doesn't feel like it's too much. And B, that you still might have to learn how to be with your desire and learn how to ask for it again and again and again. That might be part of the path that you have to walk to going closer to having the thing you want and being able to experience all that sensation along the way, is like, how do I keep asking for it? How do I ask for it in a new way? Like for me, my practice is like, how do I like, well, I asked 15 times, why didn't he do it? Right? Like that's what's happening in my head. That's not the reality. That's just what my head is saying. So how do I ask in a way that he gets to hear something he hasn't heard before? How do I ask in a way where it feels good to hear the desire? In my relationship, and I think this is probably true in others, but like definitely Moritz and I like work hard to be in this game, this honesty game all the time, right? That like, he is like, well, what's your desire? Before I can even like, he's like, tell me more, right? That I've signed up for that. And he's signed up for that, right? To know that the power of me being in touch with my desire is like so much more available in how intimate and how connected we can be. And that if I'm really connected to my desire and him connected to his desire too, it's not only the woman, but there is a power in the woman being connected to her desire, and the other partner being tapped into that, right? Like I'm opening something for both of us. And we both know that like, I might have to ask multiple times. I might feel like, oh no, I'm too much. But the reality is like, I think when we fear that we're too much, we're going in the right direction. That like, we should be too much. We should let all of those desires, like that's a sign that something in here is like, oh, there's more to come out. Oh, there's something more. There's more I want to know about you. There's more I want to know about myself. There's more I want to feel. So the short answer is like, go towards, like run in the direction of that. Like what if I'm too much? And I don't want to say that without acknowledging like how terrifying it is to open up desire. Like it is scary. And it's just scary because it's so much power available to you. So if you're heading in that direction, you're going the right way, keep going. And that song from Hamilton is so great. Like, I won't go into the whole rabbit hole of that. I can do it offline if anyone wants to do that with me. But like, I will never be satisfied because I'm always going to want more. And that's what desire is. Like desire is never going to stop happening. Like if it does, I'm dead. Like I have to keep wanting more and inviting desire out more and having more and like learning how to be with a bigger desire, right? I have to like let go of the old shell so I can like have a bigger one, so I can create more in my life.
I love that so much because it's like, oh, I'm a master of the game. And then it's like, no, it's
wait a minute.
Bigger, even more terrifying that is
the
next truth to get into openness with. and it never, you know, and I see you embody this beautifully. I see other teachers of mine, get constantly worked by the next leveling up and opening and expansion.
Stay tuned for the women coming tomorrow night, women in Olivia's program. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about this tomorrow.
Yeah. So that's right. Sasha's coming in tomorrow to teach in Crawl, which is my program for women. And Danielle has actually asked a question here, and Danielle is in Crawl. So it may be that we cover this tomorrow.
Can we start a post in Crawl so for the women that are watching this live that can put it there? That'd be great.
Yes, great. We can have a question. Yeah, great. That's a great idea.
Yes, bring your questions. None of you can be too much. Please bring the questions.
Bring it.
Olivia,
go on.
I was going to say, while you're looking at the questions, I just wanted to sort of touch on what Danielle said with and something that Sasha said. It might be helpful. And it's not long, but I'd just add that one of the ways when we feel like we're asking for too much, to me, it's almost like a sneaky preference. Like you want to show up manicured. And this is technically what this talk is about. This talk is about when do our preferences take us out of the game? We've been talking about all the ways that you stay on the mat, all the ways that you stay in the room, all the ways that we level up, all the ways that we surround ourselves with people that hold us to the highest version of ourselves, that hold us to our truth. And there are places where our preferences take us out. So what you're actually inviting people to do here is, before you take yourself out of the game, ask yourself where you're at with
it. Whoa, that's nice. So good. I feel great about completing there. That was really, really good. Thank you. I want to give you guys a moment to hang on. I want to just say one more thing. Because this feels like a good peak to complete. It just feels really rich, and we went so many different places and touched all the notes, and a lot to digest. Good 90 minutes of connection and transmission here. So I want to say thank you to both of you, and I have such a unique and special kind of love for you both individually and for us together, and it feels like the unfolding of a beautiful something that is deeply in service to the world. And I feel that in the reception of it and the comments and just how it's felt to have this conversation publicly. So thank you. And for everybody watching, thank you for being so engaged and for, chiming along. And I'm sure there's going to be more to come in the follow-up when this is going to be published in a few different places. And I would love for anyone viewing this to know intimately how they can reach you. What is it that you have available, if there's anything available that people can be a part of? If they're interested to learn more about what you do work-wise, how would they contact you? And any final comments that you have to say about this experience today? Yeah.
Catherine, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
I want you to go.
Okay. Well, you can reach out to me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is @Sasha Echo, SASHAEKO, and I'll put that down in the comments. Please follow me on Instagram. That's my personal Instagram account, but it's really where I share the most vulnerable, juicy things. And I do talk a little bit about my coaching on my Instagram as well. I'm also opening up a brand new group and a very exciting offer for mamas. So if you're a mama, and this is a trans affirming space, but centering women, but mamas are welcome to reach out to me. Feel free to message me on Facebook, or you can reach out to me on Instagram. And it's going to be a monthly membership group where there's calls and we get together and kind of create community and rebuild the village with a little sprinkling of some of what you got here tonight. So affirming ourselves as women and holding on to who we are and rebuilding who we are in connection with other women while we parent and while we become who we are, become rebirthed through motherhood. So that is my newest exciting offering. It doesn't have a name yet. It's still in its infancy, but it's still in its gestation, I should say. But it's going to be launched early November. So if you're interested, reach out to me. I have a special offer for anyone who signs up before the end of the year. And I have a couple slots open for one-to-one coaching. So if you liked what you saw here and you're interested in having some of what Catherine and Olivia so generously talked about, please reach out to me. I'm happy to connect with you more about that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank
My
you.
goodness. Sasha is like the sugar. So much more. I totally love you. The best way to reach me would be at Coach Catherine N, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook and through instant message, like DM me. I currently have one-to-one slots available, so I'm in conversations all the time about that. That's one of my favorite ways to work. And the new thing that is brewing for the ladies that are interested is how to stay in community with women that are playing a higher level game. So if you're interested in knowing more about that, reach out to me as well.
So good. Thank you. I have personally loved this and love the opportunity to do this. And if anyone's watching live, there's still 25 of you. So I'd love to hear what you're leaving with. If you've been here the whole time and I know some of you have been commenting a lot, but I'd love to hear from those that are still here. What are you leaving this conversation with? So we can really get a feel for that. And there'll be more talk shows. There's no schedule, there's no plan, but when the next the next conversation is ready to happen, this will be the place I do it. Facebook Live.
Can I add one thing?
Mm-hmm.
I will put a link in the comments. My husband and I are going to do a live talk in the coming weeks. I don't have the date off the top of my head. I'll put a link in the comments if you want to learn more about how we do what we do. Tune in.
Yes. Awesome. Yes. Great. Will be links in the comments. If you're just joining, we're just ending. So go back. You can watch this from the beginning. It will be up forevermore. Okay. Thank you so much. You ladies stay here. And stop live stream. Thank you. Okay, so
Maybe for safe measure, just stop recording.
Can we